Good morning. Welcome to episode 32 of Tea, Coffee, and Torah. I'm glad to have you with me this morning. We are discussing the Dead Sea Scrolls. Now, the purpose of this particular series is to show how Israel's prophets quoted from Torah, from divine law, as a source of authority, first of all, but also to show that the written Torah was something that was very ancient to the prophets. It was something that they deemed as a source of authority. They quoted from it, and then they also quoted from their predecessors. So what we have been seeing in this series thus far, and bear with me, I'm still a little sneezy this morning, is that the phrases that they use to refer to the Exodus are actually very, very consistent. And it's consistent not just in the Masoretic text, but as we're going to see today, in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Because the Dead Sea Scrolls all take a very, very similar wording and similar concepts to what we have in the Masoretic text, which is what the King James Version is based on. So we're just going to delve in this morning because I want to give you the evidence so that way you can see for yourself. Now, I have uploaded another file. I hope that it should be the very first thing on my feed underneath this document. You can print it if you want to, or just refer to it, whatever works best for you. We are using Jeremiah 32, verse 21 as the basis of our comparison because Jeremiah is very, very late. And this allows us to see what words, phrases, and context are reiterated throughout the biblical text. So when we see a consistency, it allows us to see that, hey, this is original. This concept does not change. Now, there's a lot of discussion in scholarship regarding variant wordings. And in the Dead Sea Scrolls, you do get some variant spellings. But what you find is that, and please note, in that document, I have posted links to the Dead Sea Scrolls online so you can research this for yourself. Don't take my word for it. Do your own research, do your own homework. And all those scrolls are linked there. There's 4 different sites. There's one in English. There's one that has the photographs so that you can actually see. In one of them, it shows the Paleo Hebrew. What you find with the Qumran community, which is where the Dead Sea Scrolls originated, the sources that they saw to be most ancient and most authoritative were in Paleo Hebrew, or at least there was a copy of them in a Paleo Hebrew text. Now, we have about 22 chapters of Genesis through Exodus that are retained. Now, these are all fragments. If you look at those photos, you'll see that, you may get 4 or 5 lines, but they're just pieces because these are such old documents that they have fallen, they've just disintegrated back into dust. So we only have very small remnants of what would have been an original text. But the fact that these have been copied and put into own people's words, they've been updated so that they remain relevant, shows that this was based on something that is very, very ancient, something that was seen to have authority. Now, as regarding authority, one of the things that you find in the Qumran community in their extra biblical text is that they will use the Exodus or Genesis through Exodus, and they will refer to it and they with the phrase, "Thus it is written," appealing to the original authority of the Torah, the written Torah. This later becomes popular in the New Testament, where it is written something like 15 times throughout the New Testament, "Thus is it written." And that "thus is it written" always refers to the Old Testament, Tanakh, something that is either in divine law or in the prophets. And you find that the Qumran community had the same concept because their extra biblical documents also refer to the "thus is it written" only refers to the divine law or something that would be in the sacred text, not really extra biblical text. The other thing that you find is that the Qumran community also wrote commentaries and had discussion on jurisprudence regarding the regulations that we find through Genesis, through Exodus. So all of these things show that by about maybe 200, 250 BCE, there definitely was a concept of some sort of original divine law that was given to Moses, and an idea that it was central to the nation's foundation. And what I want to look at today, and on this document that I've uploaded, just go one post back this morning, you'll see the document. It is another Excel document. I have all of the Qumran texts, all of the Dead Sea Scrolls are in peach. And what we are looking at are very particular phrases. We are specifically looking at the phrases of Israel coming out of Egypt, of Israel coming out with a strong and mighty hand. Sometimes that's an outstretched arm. The fact that Yahweh did signs and wonders. Also the fact that Yahweh is doing these things because it is something that he swore to Israel's forefathers. And then also a land flowing with milk and honey. Those are the main elements that we find in Jeremiah. But we find this consistently in every single scroll. Well, let me put it this way. Every scroll where it has not been damaged or where that portion is retained. Now, sometimes the verses recur out of order. They're not always in the same order, which definitely shows that they're copying from a different manuscript. They just may put, you know, if you had maybe the original Exodus was maybe 5 different scrolls that were originally written under Moses. When I say 5 scrolls, I'm talking about maybe the Exodus story from Exodus 1 through Exodus 12 may have been 3 or 4 different scrolls. And you may have had 3 or 4 different scribes writing under Moses, recording those and putting them in their own words. We do know from Egyptian texts that when an event is written by different scribes as early as the 1800 BCE. So this would have been, very early in the New Kingdom. Even though you have different scribes writing about the same event, their words do not match word for word. They are very much in that own scribe's word, even though that scribe adheres to very formatic ways of saying things. So there is some leniency and some leeway, and we will eventually get into the Egyptian text. That's going to require a lot of preparation on my part to do the topic justice, and I really want to show this. Right now I'm just focusing on Exodus, but there are thousands of different things that you can do that demonstrate prophet scholarship in ancient Israel. And I'm going to say something about this before we close today, because I think it's a very important point when we are looking at this. But let's delve into the Dead Sea Scrolls right now. So the first scroll that I have on here is going to be scroll 4Q1 of the Dead Sea Scrolls. And this is known as the Genesis through Exodus scroll. And I'm going to put my eyes on this morning. For some reason, I couldn't get my document to send so I could print it out. So I'm working off my laptop, and I got to have some old lady eyes for this. So, this I am beginning in verse 19. So it says, I know that the king of Egypt will not give you permission to go, not with a mighty hand. I will reach out my hand and strike Egypt with all my wonders, which I do among them. And after that, he will let you go. And I will give this people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. And it will happen that they will let you go, and you shall not go out empty-handed. Notice that this is written as though it is there. It is written as though it is an account of something that is unraveling. The same thing that we see in Exodus 3 in the Masoretic text. We have similar phrases, mighty hand. And then, there's also this outstretched arm that we find in Jeremiah. It's not in Exodus 3, but it is in other parts of the Masoretic text. We also find this idea of wonders. Now, Jeremiah says signs and wonders, and here in this text is just simply abbreviated to wonders. Now, let me just state that the word for wonders here in the Dead Sea Scrolls is damaged. So this is a restored word, but based on the evidence, wonders and this of course is the English translation, is the best translation. I believe in the Hebrew it's ot, is the original for signs and for wonders. Now, as we continue going on, we still have this concept of coming out of Egypt. It may not be the exact words, but the concepts are reiterated and they are exactly the same. So now let's go over to the Dead Sea Scrolls. This is going to be scroll 4Q13. And this is again, Exodus 3:19 and 20. And this is what the text says. Notice how similar these are. They do differ from the Masoretic, but never once when you look at the entire compilation of the information, it's all there. It may be in a different order, but it is there. So it says, I know the king of Egypt won't give you permission to go. Now I put gray shaded, this because it is not in the original text. It says, here come the old lady guys. No, not except by a mighty hand, I will stretch out my hand and strike Egypt with all my wonders, and I will do among them. And after that, he will let you go. And thus I will give the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, and it will happen that you will not go out empty handed. So now this idea of not going out empty handed is found other places in the Masoretic text. And as a matter of fact, he even says that Israel will plunder the Egyptians. But we have these same concepts. Notice that there's not a contradiction of concepts. And even though the wording can be updated, it can be modernized, it's still the same story. It's still the same thing. There is no deviant as to what happened. And let me make this point again. When it talks about wonders, we have no other document except Exodus 3 through 12 that tell us what those wonders are. It refers back to those wonders, but only in those texts do we find what would be an original record of the plagues, the signs and wonders that Yahweh did in Egypt. So now let's go over to, and what I am doing, if you'll notice, in white, there is the Masoretic text, and then in the peach, I have two versions or one version of the Dead Sea Scrolls. So you can compare the Masoretic text with the text that we have grown up on in most of our respective religious traditions. So now the next one is going to be Exodus 6:1. Here we have the idea of a strong and outstretched hand. So I'm going to put my old lady glasses on and we're going to read this one. It says, therefore tell the children of Israel, I am Yahweh, and I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians, and I will rid you of their bondage, and I will redeem you with an outstretched arms and great judgments. Now, you can remember that in other Exodus texts, it talks about this being, or God's signs and wonders being great judgments. And I will take you to myself for a people, and I will be your God. And you shall know that I am Yahweh your God, who brings you out from under their burdens of the Egyptians. I will bring you to the land which I swore to give to Abraham, and other versions say to Isaac and to Jacob. And I will give it to you for a heritage. I am Yahweh. Yahweh spoke to Moses and Aaron and gave them commandment to the children of Israel and to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to bring the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt. So notice that these phrases are consistent throughout the text. Even when we have different scrolls, there is definitely a effort to maintain the original text, to maintain some sort of fidelity. And the concepts are the same. The wording may be a little bit different, but it does not impinge the integrity of what is being retold. Now, the last one that we're going to look at, and let me just reiterate something I didn't include this because the space didn't allow, but in the links below, go and look at those links below, because some of them have translations, some of them you can read in the original Hebrew, but you find all the concepts. One of the things I didn't put here is this idea that Israel came out of Egypt by her garrison forces or by her armies. And you do find those words in the Dead Sea Scrolls, that Israel came out of Egypt within her armies, or organized according to her units or her battalions. So that is something that you also find in the Dead Sea Scrolls as well as the Masoretic text. Now, this is very interesting because when we go now to Exodus 13, which is the Dead Sea Scrolls, this is going to be 4Q16. The verses don't line up side by side. They're in a slightly different order. The concept in both texts is the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And both of them, I've underlined the word remember in 4Q16 versus Exodus 13 in the Masoretic, which is a memorial. But notice these have the same concept. This is a call for Israel to remember their coming out of the land of Egypt and to celebrate this memorial through a feast of unleavened bread. So I'm going to read the Dead Sea Scrolls. You can compare it with the with what is written in Exodus 13, 9 through 10. So Moses said unto the people, remember this day in which you came out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage, for by strength of hand Yahweh brought you out from this place. No leavened bread shall be eaten. Today you shall go out in the month of Aviv. And it shall be, when Yahweh your God shall bring you to the land of the Canaanite, Hittite, Amorite, Hivite, and Jebusite, which he swore to your fathers, you shall to give you a land flowing with milk and honey, that you shall keep this service in this month. So notice, we still have the same elements. We have coming out of the land of Egypt. There is always a reference to Israel somewhere in there. And this text doesn't have the reference to Israel, but most of them do. By strength of hand, something he swore to his fathers, the idea of a promised land of flowing with milk and honey. So this is incredible consistency. There's in scholarship, you have a lot of disagreement over textual variants. And I want to bring to your attention, because the German school of thought has really pervaded academics today, not just for biblical scholarship, but through everything. It doesn't matter what history you look at. You can look at American history. You can look at European history. The German school of thought is very deconstructionist. A text, no matter the text, even outside the biblical text, that text is guilty until being proved innocent. And it will always adopt a nihilistic point of view, even to the point where it just becomes really absurd. The demand that, so let me start first of all with the assumption. In biblical circles, there is the assumption that Moses had to write, his hand itself had to write the entire Torah. I find that to be a gross assumption. Even today, we know that texts that are only written by one hand are usually false. We can look at Joseph Smith. We can look at some of the other traditions that have come down as a one-person only document. We know that there's a lot of room for fraud with those types of traditions and religious beliefs. You don't find that idea in the Torah. You find the idea that God was revealed to an entire nation of people. Like the entire nation heard God's voice, and this transmission was something that wasn't just given to Moses, but it was also the scribes that were underneath him. And this is something that, again, eventually I am going to get into with Egyptian scholarship, and showing that the generals of the army were the ones who wrote history. So this would have been the generals under Moses. This would have been maybe Hur. It definitely would have been Joshua. And this leaves room for other unknown scribes that would have transmitted Israel's history. But they would have put it into their own words. So we would have had an accurate retelling, an accurate historical account, but the words would not have matched. The other thing is that when we look at history, if this document were to only have had one set of words that were always reiterated exactly the same, very stoically, and very word for word, it really would have shows that the text would be late, number one. But number two, it would show that it was never disseminated throughout society, so that society felt very comfortable retelling the story in their own words. So all the things that, this is what I find ironic, is all those things that are criticized today, when you think about it logically, are really evidences of an original transmission. Now, we're going to come back to this. And you know what? Let me reiterate something more, because I'm going to really harp on this issue, because this is my pet peeve. I find that whether we look at academia, whether we look at politics, whether we look at religion, one of the main reasons that scholars are very uncomfortable with the idea of prophets using scholarships, of prophets following a chain of command, of prophets evoking divine law as their ultimate source of authority, is because it holds everyone accountable. You cannot come up with some theory, with some thesis, with some hypothesis, with some dissertation. Well, you can still come up with a dissertation, but it really lacks credibility when that original source holds whatever ideas you have accountable. This means that modern trends in mysticism would be revealed to be in gross error. Ideas of religious interpretation that do not uphold the written text of divine law all of a sudden fall flat. So this means that a lot of people, whether it's scholarship or religion, that have garnered a following both anciently and modernly, all of a sudden the basis of their argument falls flat when it contradicts that written text. And when you see, as I'm showing, this idea of the Exodus, I mean, and this again is just one idea that is consistently over and over reiterated consistently throughout Scripture, then it limits those other interpretations that you try to extract from the text. And nobody likes that, because everybody wants to insert mysticism, to insert religiosity into the text that doesn't exist, so that you look to them. And I've given you the link so you can do the research yourself, so that you can hold everybody accountable, so you're not led astray. But more than that, when you're in discussions with other people, you're well armed. You have this information, and you can be a messiah for truth. You can be a source of strength that can stand up for the facts and the evidence, because it's not in the strength of just one or two people or just an elite set of scholars that are doing this. It's when we all do this that, guess what? The deception, it's game over, because we're all educated and we all know. It becomes the emperor's clothes. You know, we can recognize when the emperor is playing his own game and just wants us to go along. And we don't do that because we're armed with the text. So next week will be the last week. We're going to delve into more Dead Sea Scrolls. Next on Thursday, remember we are on a Sunday-Thursday schedule now. We're going to delve into some new Dead Sea Scrolls, and we're going to see how consistent these ideas of the Exodus are, and how they really allow us to have great faith and confidence in the text. So, and thank you so much for your comments. I really appreciate all of the ideas that you are sharing, all of the your perspectives and your research. So thank you. Please keep those comments coming, and have a fantastic week. I will see you on Thursday. Shalom.